Hello and welcome to the class. My name's Paddy. Today we're going to talk about how to write conclusions in writing task 2. After this class, if you have any questions, remember that you can click on the chat icon which is at the top of your page there. If you click on that icon, you will be able to send us a message with any questions that you have. This is the first class of 2 classes, and this video will last just over 20 minutes. First, we're going to look at what makes a conclusion, and then how to structure your conclusion. So by the end of this class, you will be more aware of how to plan to write your conclusion. During this class, there will be some questions for you to answer. I will tell you when you need to answer these. You can find these questions below the video. I will give you 10 to 15 seconds to answer each of these questions. Okay, let's get started. The conclusion is probably the part of the essay that students miss out the most. This is usually because they run out of time towards the end, but when you're planning, it's essential that you make time for a good conclusion. The role of the conclusion paragraph is to summarize what you've said in the essay, both the topic and your points. So the role or the purpose of the conclusion is, as I say, to summarize the main message of the essay. So what was the topic of the essay? What was the theme? You also want to summarize the points that you made. So for example, if it's a discussion essay with 2 sides, you'll summarize what points you made on both sides, maybe with 1 sentence or with 2. The conclusion is also the place to put your opinion. So in the majority of essays, you should include your opinion at the end. In an opinion essay, you have to include your opinion in the conclusion. The way that we summarize is by paraphrasing your previous points. You don't want to copy exactly the same language that you used in your body paragraphs. You need to make it clear what you've said. Your central arguments should be clear in your head because of your planning stage. So state them clearly, just as you would in your topic sentences for your body paragraphs. A good conclusion is absolutely necessary for a good task achievement score. It's stated in the marking criteria that if a conclusion is missing, you will not get a high score. Because the conclusion is a summary of the contents of the essay, both the main arguments and the topic, we should be able to get an idea of the question just from reading the conclusion. Here is an example conclusion paragraph. Let's read through it and see if we can get an idea of the topic. In summary, mixed gender schools offer several advantages over separate schools for girls and boys, but not without problems. Children develop their social skills much more effectively with a mix of the sexes, although it may sometimes be at the cost of their ability to focus on their studies. In my view, children are much better off in schools where they can learn to interact with the opposite sex. So we have 3 sentences here. The first sentence, starting in summary, is a summary of the topic. It gives us an idea of what this whole essay is about. The second sentence talks about the 2 points I made in my essay. So children develop their social skills much more effectively with a mix of the sexes, although it may sometimes be at the cost of their ability to focus on their studies. So it's showing 2 sides, 2 opposing arguments there. And finally, in my view, so this is my opinion, in my view, children are much better off in schools where they can learn to interact with the opposite sex. Of those 3 sentences, the first one is going to be closer to a lot of the language in the question. The second sentence is going to be closer to what I said in my body paragraph. And the third sentence, again, is my opinion. So let's think about what the question to this essay could be. Here are 3 possible questions. I would like you to decide which one you think this conclusion is responding to. Look at the first question below this video. and choose the correct option, A, B, or C. The question for this conclusion was B. Some people believe boys and girls should be educated in separate schools, while others argue that mixed gender schools are best. We can see this idea paraphrased in our first sentence. Mixed gender schools offer several advantages over separate schools for girls and boys. So it's comparing those two different types of school. Schools where you have boys and girls together and schools where it's just girls or schools where it's just boys. Question A, it could not be. Some people say that children need the opposite sex to develop their social skills. Our second sentence says children develop their social skills more effectively with a mix of the sentence. So this comes from our body paragraph. We could not copy this idea from the question. C, some people argue that children are better off in schools where they can learn to interact with the opposite sex. Well, this was the point I made in my opinion. I'm not going to copy my opinion from the question. So that first sentence, in summary, is kind of paraphrasing the question. It's similar to what we would do in the first sentence of our introduction. So let's focus on that first sentence. Let's read it again. In summary, mixed gender schools offer several advantages over separate schools for girls and boys, but not without problems. I'm going to show you some statements, and I would like you to decide if these are true or false about this sentence. Number 1. This sentence paraphrases a part of the question. Look at the next question below this video and choose true or false for sentence number 1. Sentence number 1 is true. The first sentence of your conclusion should summarize the topic of the essay. The topic of your essay should come from the question. So if your essay has been on the correct topic, then in a way, your first sentence of your conclusion will paraphrase part of the question, similar to the introduction. Number 2, this sentence paraphrases a part of my introduction. Is this true or false? Look at the next question below this video and choose the correct option. Number 2 is also true. As I said before, your introduction should contain a paraphrasing of the question, and your conclusion will also be about the topic of the essay. So the first sentence will talk about that topic, and so it will also paraphrase the question in some way. Obviously, you should not use the same language in both your conclusion and introduction. Number 3, this sentence shows the arguments or shows the points on both sides of the argument. Look at the next question below this video and decide if that's true or false. Sentence number 3 is false. Your first sentence will, as I said before, summarize the topic of the essay. You'll give an outline of the two sides, just like this example here. Mixed gender schools versus separate schools for girls and boys. But it doesn't explain what the points are. It doesn't explain what the negative aspect of mixed gender schools are or what's good about separate schools. So it doesn't actually say anything about the arguments or points. You should save this for the summarizing sentence that comes after your first sentence. Number 4, this sentence shows my opinion. True or false? Look at the next question below this video and choose the correct option. Number 4 is false. There's nothing in here about my opinion. We should save this for the last sentence of our conclusion. Number 5. This sentence starts with a discourse marker. Is that true or false? Look at the next question below this video and choose the correct option. Number 5 is true. The discourse marker that we're talking about is in summary. You should always indicate that your conclusion is a conclusion with a discourse marker like this. Now I'm going to show you some other discourse markers. I would like you to decide if we can start our conclusions with these or if we can't. In summary, the last thing is in conclusion, to conclude, finally, at last, and to sum up. Look at the next question below this video and choose the 4 correct options we can use to start our conclusion. The discourse markers that are correct here are in summary, in conclusion, to conclude, and to sum up. Notice how all 4 of those either are connected to the word summary or connected to the word conclusion. The phrases the last thing or finally or at last are usually used to give the last point. Now your conclusion, you're not giving another point, you're summarizing what you've already said. So those 3 are not correct. Now let's think about the second sentence or second sentences of your conclusion. Remember, these are a summary of the actual points or arguments that you made in your essay. Those arguments should be clear from the topic sentences of your body paragraphs. Here's my topic sentence from body paragraph 1. So that's the first sentence of body paragraph 1. It is possible that we do not know the full long-term effects of eating genetically modified foods, as they have only recently been introduced to global diets. From body paragraph 2, I've got my other topic sentence, so that's going to be a different point. However, there is no doubt that genetically modified plants, like rice or wheat, can produce a much greater amount of food, which could help to stop people dying from hunger. So looking at these 2 topic sentences and remembering that they're going to present different sides of an argument, what do we think is the question or the topic of this essay? Look at the next question below this video. I'm going to tell you 3 possible questions, and I'd like you to decide which is the question for this essay. Is it A, should we always trust scientists? Which is more important, advice from experts or advice from friends? B, what are the advantages and disadvantages of genetically modified foods? C, what are the causes of people dying from hunger and what are the solutions? Look at the question below this video and choose the correct option. So judging from these 2 topic sentences, the answer is B. This question is asking us, what are the advantages and disadvantages of genetically modified foods? Body paragraph 1 seems to talk about the disadvantages of genetically modified food, and body paragraph 2 seems to talk about the advantages. So let's look at body paragraph 1's topic sentence again. It's possible that we do not know the long-term effects of eating genetically modified foods because they've only recently been introduced to global diets. Body paragraph 2's topic sentence. However, there is no doubt that genetically modified plants like rice or wheat can produce much greater amount of food. This can help to stop people dying from hunger. So for our conclusion, we need to summarize these 2 points. We could do this in 1 sentence or we could do this in 2 sentences, but we can't use exactly the same language. We're going to have to paraphrase them in some way. So let's think about some words we could use to paraphrase. We need synonyms. So for body paragraph 1, We have unknown for do not know. Long-term effects, we could say result or consequence. Eating, consuming, or the consumption of. Recently, we could say recent as an adjective or just new. Introduced to, the introduction of. And global diets, what people eat or the food that people eat. In body paragraph 2, we can paraphrase our topic sentence by again thinking of some synonyms. GM plants like rice or wheat, this could be crops. Produce more food or higher yield. This is a specific agricultural word that means amount of food that you get from your farms. Help to stop, we could say prevent or reduce. Dying from hunger, death from starvation, or maybe death from malnutrition. So if we take these two topic sentences, paraphrase them using synonyms, we're going to get our sentences for our conclusion. Here they are. The long-term health consequences of consuming genetically modified foods are still unknown due to its recent invention. GM crops produce more food, which will prevent deaths from starvation and malnutrition. I've already developed these points and explained them in my body paragraphs, so I don't need to do them again. I have sentence number 1 and sentence number 2. You could keep them as 2 sentences or combine them into 1. But there is a problem here. The first sentence talks about the disadvantages, and the second sentence talks about the advantages. So there's a contrast here. I need to show this using a linking expression. What linking expression could we use here? Look at the next question below this video. I'd like you to choose 3 linking expressions we could use to connect these sentences. Remember, they could go between the 2 sentences or perhaps at the start of the first sentence. They need to show the contrast, the difference of the side of the argument. Which 3 would you choose? Select the correct options out of whereas, although, however, despite the fact that, furthermore, and in contrast. So the linking phrases we could use are although, however, and despite the fact that. So these can be used to talk about different arguments or different opinions on the same thing. Whereas and in contrast are usually used to show 2 different things that have differences between them. Furthermore is just used to add information. In these 2 sentences, I'm going to use although. Although the long-term health consequences of consuming GM foods are still unknown due to its recent invention, GM crops produce more food which will prevent deaths from starvation and malnutrition. I could also put however between the sentences or even despite the fact that at the beginning or between the 2 sentences. Now let's think about that final sentence. This is usually where you give your opinion. In discussion essays, opinion essays, direct question essays, even advantage and disadvantage essays, it's a good place to give your view. In a problem and solution essay, you might express what you hope to happen in the future. I'm going to show you some examples of final sentences for this genetically modified foods essay. We're going to decide if these are good or bad. First of all, sentence A. In my opinion, we should be careful about experimenting with GM foods because it could be harmful to our health. Is this good or bad? This is a good sentence to put at the end. First of all, it starts with an opinion phrase, in my opinion, making it clear that this is your view. In my opinion is very common, but it's absolutely appropriate for a conclusion. We should be careful about experimenting with GM foods because it could be harmful to our health. So this student has taken a side. They've decided that, generally speaking, they're not truly in favor of GM foods, but they're showing that they're not completely against. They're just saying we should be careful because it could be harmful to our health. So this language is very hesitant about being too extreme, which is fantastic. Let's look at B. I suppose both sides have a good argument. Is this good or bad? This is not very good. Especially for an opinion essay, this student has not really taken a side. So I would avoid doing something like this, where you say, in my opinion, it depends. Really, you should choose a side. Even if it's not your real opinion, in an opinion essay, you should definitely choose a side. Also, the expression, I suppose, is not very appropriate for an essay, task 2. C. Genetically modified foods help solve world hunger. I would like you to decide if this is good or bad. Look at the next question below this video and choose the correct option. Is this a good final sentence or is it a bad final sentence? This is not a good final sentence, it's bad. There are 2 reasons. First of all, it's a little bit short. I would maybe extend it by saying something like, GM foods are a necessary technology which can help solve world hunger. So I'm building on what I mean by GM foods. Also, more importantly, it doesn't start with an opinion phrase. So I would want to start this with something like, in my opinion, in my view, in my personal view, something like this. D. From my perspective, it is clear that genetically modified foods are dangerous because some tests have shown that they can cause diseases like cancer and they may be damaging to the ecosystem near agricultural areas. Is this a good final sentence or a bad one? Look at the next question below this video and choose the correct option. Sentence D is bad. The language is fantastic. The vocabulary is impressive. The grammar is wonderful. But they have explained and developed their point a little bit, which is not the purpose of a conclusion. To me, this looks like the student is adding extra arguments as to why genetically modified foods are bad. This is breaking a big rule for conclusions. Don't add new information. Don't make extra points. Your opinion should use arguments that you've already used. For example, up here, GM foods because it could be harmful to our health. So in my previous paragraphs, I've already mentioned the health consequences of GM foods. Don't add new points in your conclusion. Finally, E. Is this a good sentence or a bad sentence? Look at the next question below this video and choose the correct option. Sentence E is good. It gives a personal perspective and talks about the student's own experience. I avoid eating genetically modified foods. This is fine. You don't want to do this too much, and I would recommend avoiding it. But in this case, it's absolutely fine because they've shown it as their opinion. And then they've made it a little bit more global at the end with, I believe they do play an important role in feeding people. So that's talking generally. So avoid being too personal, but it's not a bad thing if you do include a little bit of personal experience. Okay, that is the end of the class. Now it's time to watch class 2 and then do any of the extra training and practice activities on this topic. If you have any questions for us, remember that you can click on that chat icon at the top of your page there. Clicking on that icon will let you send us a message with any questions that you have. Thank you for listening.